Today's daf is Maseches Nazir Daf Ches. Today's shir is Le'ilu Nishmas Dina Bas Gershon. May her neshama have an aliyah. We're at the Mishnah, the top line, Chesem and Aleph. The Mishnah discusses additional ways that you could have a Kabbalah on Naziris. Zakte in the Mishnah, Hareini Nazir Kesar Roishi. If somebody said, when we had Nazir like the Hiram they had, the Chafar Arts, or like the dirt on the earth, the sand in the ground, Choil Hayam, like the sand in the ocean, the sea. The halacha is Harei Zeh Nazir Olam. He becomes a Nazir Olam his whole life. Why? Because his kavana is to mekabel on themselves Naziris, separate Nazirises that will be chal, like the amount of years that he has, which is an endless amount, or like the pieces of dirt, which is also. So halacha is megaleach achas shloshim yom. At the end of each Naziris, every 30 days, he takes a haircut. He's megaleach. Rabbi says, ein megaleach achas shloshim yom. He's not allowed to cut his hair even once in 30 days. Rather, he's a Nazir Olam, and he's not allowed to take his haircut his whole life, because he became on himself a one long Naziris, which stretches long days, like the amounts of hair on his head, because that's what he said. So we don't see, there's no indication in that he wants 30-day, wants it in increments of 30 days. The Ezahu megaleach achshloshim yom. When do you have a Nazir that he has separate Naziris for his whole life for 30 days at a shop? So if he's mekabel Naziris, so zokt the Mishnah, Rebbe says, when is it that he's megalech every 30 days? When he's in Kamal Naziris and Lashon Rabin. He says, Nazirus, Kesar Rosh, Chafar Arz, Choel Hayam. So in that case, Rebbe agrees that his kavana is for separate Naziris, because he says Naziris, a lot of Naziris is mashma. He wants different one. It's mashma that he wants them to be split up the 30-day Naziris. Zok Mishnah Bait. Hareini Nazir Malay Habayis. If he says he's a Nazir like Malay Habayis, like a full house, he says Hareini Nazir Malay Akupa, like a full basket. So we kind of inspect him. We ask him what was his intention. If he says I'm the Kabbal one Naziris of 30 days, and he meant to say that it takes a toll on him and it's hard on him, like a Mali Bayis and Mali Kupa, then the halacha is he's Nazir only Shloshim Yom. V'im Amar Stam Nazir, he says no, Stam, that was my Kabbalah's Naziris, and whatever Chacham decide how to interpret my words, that's what I'll take. Then Royas Akupa Kilu Malay Achardo, then we look at the basket like it's full of mustard seeds, which is very small. The Nazir Kol Yamam, and the halacha is that he's a Nazir all his life. A lot of Naziris in one after another of 30 days each. Zok the Mishnah Vayit. Arei Nazir Mikan Mokum Zloini. If he says, I am a Nazir from here until I reach this place, so Einin Kama Yomim Mikan Ad Mokum Ploni. Then we evaluate how many days it take for him to get from this place until that place. In Pachas Mishloshim Yoim, Nazir Shloshim Yoim. If it's less than 30 days, then the halacha is he is a Nazir for 30 days. Because there's no Naziris less than 30 days. V'im lav Nazir Kimini Ayama. So you say, if it takes less than 30 days to get to the place, then Allah is a Nazir for 30 days. Because Stab Naziris is a minimum 30 days. V'im lav, if it's Mana Alicha is more than 30 days, and he's a Nazir Kimini, let's say it takes 43 days to get there, then he is a Nazir for those amount of days that it takes to travel there. If he says I'm a Nazir like the amount of days of sun, mine is in Naziris committing mine separate Naziris in 30-day increments, like the minyan Moisachama, which is 365 days to the year in Moisachama. Why? Because since he says Kiminyan, we say that his intention is for separate Nazirusin and not for one long Nazirus. Amar Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda says that I could bring a raya to this halacha. From Maisa Haya, there was a Maisa by guys Mekabel themselves Naziris, this type of Naziris, and Chachamim were Mechayiv him, they obligated him to be Noyig 365 days Naziris. So Dr. Yehuda, the Maisa was, came as a Hishlam Mace. Since it's one of the Chachamim Mechayiv to Mekabel Naziris, like those amount of days of 365, I guess in sets of 30. And once the guy who's Masham is Naziris, he died. So apparently, since he died, it looks like he's Mamali is Tafkid, so to speak, and so he's the right that's halacha. Zaktei Gemara, Royan is Hakupa Ki'ilu Malaya Chardal. The Mishnah said that you baidik him and you see what is his kavana. So if he says Stam Nazarti, and we leave it up to Chacham to interpret his words, and we say, you look at the Kupa Ki'ilu Malaya Chardal. Zaktei Gemara, Royan is Hakupa Ki'ilu Malaya Chardal v'Nazir Kol Yamav. Frak the Gemara v'Amai, why am I machmer him? Don't look at it like it has a chardal which is tiny. Look at it, maybe it's full of cucumbers, and you could actually count them. And maybe it should be one long Naziris, like the amount of kishuin that could be filled in the kupa. Well, let's say it's 54 or whatever it is. The Hevele Takanta. So the Taisus says that the Gemara, Pshat the Gemara's Kasha, the Gemara is asking Al Pi Mishnah Tahayris Perak Dal Mishazayin that Safek Naziris Lahakol. So Meli should go Lahakol over here. Said and for the Gemara Amar Chizkiya that the Mishnah that's Mavur that we explain his words L'chumra, and we say it means like a basket Mali Chardal mustard seeds Machloikis Shnuya. It's a Machloikis Tana Reb Shimon. He in the Mishnah is going like the Shita of Reb Shimon. The Amar or the Machem Atzmoi Es Atzmoi L'Davar Shesveika Chamer Revadai. It's going like Shita of Shimon. It says that a person is Mekabel on himself Naziris of a suffix, then he's machnas atzmo davar shesveika chamer revadai. Then he's mekabel on himself to machmer in the suffix. So what is this shitas Reb Shimon exactly? Zok the Gemara, the Tani we learned in a brayso. Hareini nazir almanas sheyehei b'kri zeh meyakur. If a guy says, "I will be a nazir," if there will be in this pile of tefua 100 kur. V'holach, and he went to inspect this pile of tefua to see if it has 100 kur. And he finds it's missing some. Either it got stolen or somebody who got lost. He doesn't know what happened, and there's no way to know how much was there. So Reb Shimon Oyser, Shimon says he's Aser. All Isurei Nazir. Misafik, why? Shesveik Naziris lahachmer. Safik Naziris, you say, is lahachmer. You have to go l'chumra. And even though he has to be more machmer out the Safik Naziris. Why? Because if it would have been known how many kri were in the, how many kur were in the kri. So let's say he knew that there was 100, then he would bring his karbanas at the end of his naziris, and he would be galeach. But now that he's a nazir misafik, he can't bring karbanas at all. Why? Because maybe he's not a nazir, and because he's bringing chula azara, so he's going to be aser to cut his hair la'ilam, because taglachas is tali and havas karbanas. If he can't bring karbanas because maybe he's a chula azara, then he'll never be allowed to cut his hair. So that's what Reb Shimon holds. So therefore, Zak Gemara, the same thing in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, if you go misafik, means if you're not sure what the guy's intention was when he says malikupa, if they say kachardal, so because you have a suffix, he won't be able to cut his hair because since in the Mishnah you have a suffix, if it was in Mekabel one Naziris or it was a bunch of Nazirisin, so you don't know if you could bring a carbon because maybe he's only Makabel one long Naziris, so Kamtais he doesn't have a Chiv Karban, so it's Chulun Lazara. So it makes it actually harder. So that's what Rabbi Shimon saying. When you have a suffix, you have to be machmer a lot more. Rabbi Yehuda, however, in this case is matir and oral all isur nazir. Why? Because he holds suffix naziris lahakol. So that's why in the case already nazir manashe hebi krize meyakor and got lost, you go lahakol. So the Gemara wants to say that our Mishnah that's saying that look at it Malay Chardol, that is Shitas Reb Shimon. Zok the Gemara Viter, another pshat. Why? What's taka pshat? You don't look at it like it's Malaya Kishum and Lur. Rabbi Yochanan says another pshat. Afilu Tema Rabbi Yehuda. You can't say no. The Mishnah is going like Rabbi Yehuda that you'll say Safek Nazir is Lahako. But Hassam, in the case where he makes a Nazir's Almanas that Ein Bekri Meyakor, Amanashi Yehei Bekri Zeh Meyakor, he says that it should be Meyakor in this grade. So there is different. Zakti Gemara, because Hassam like Nachas Leila Naziris, he did not go into the Chiv Naziris B'chlal, because maybe there wasn't Meyakor in this pile of Torah, and there's no Naziris at all. So Mesafik, he doesn't have any das in Kabbalah Naziris, because he understands that a suffix is more chamer than a vade, so he has no intention of going into the Naziris. But Hachazak the Gemara, in the case of Hareini Nazir, Maloy Bayis and Kupa, Nachas Leil Naziris, he agrees to Mekabel except Naziris, that's for sure. Whether it's Malaya Kishu and Malaya Chardol is definitely a Nazir. Well, Milas Saluke Mine. There's no way of taking off from himself the Chi of Naziris. So therefore, Zak the Gemara, the Mishnah could even go with Shitz of Yehuda, because you remember Yehuda's masking in our Mishnah, he's already in the parish of Naziris. So that's why we're machmer in our Mishnah. Frak the Gemara, my lo yilichzeye lekupa kilim leik shun lulun dehevelei takanta. So why don't you make all misafik and look at it like it's full of cucumbers, and dehevelei takanta, and the guy will be ois nazir one day. Salkadaitach, hasalkadaitach. So the Gemara really doesn't understand Rabbi Yochanan's Taras. The Gemara is asking, so after he finishes his first Naziris and he cuts his hair, he should not start another one Misafik, because the Safik Naziris Lahak Olamai, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So Zak the Gemara is going to explain Rabbi Yochanan's Taras to Miyashav our Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda. Zak the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Savala Karebi. Yehuda holds like Rebbe, the Tanan. Because our Mishnah says, if somebody says, Areini Nazik Sarai, she Rebbe Oimer, Ein Zim Galechach Shlishim Yoyim. Why? Because he says, because we say that he's Mekabel himself one long Naziris. And what's the case that it's after our Mishnah that he is Galech once every 13 days? Because it's considered as if he's Mekabel separate Nazirisin. If he says, Areini Nazirus, Lashon Rabim, Kesarai Shechavaretz Choel Hayam. So Zakti Gemara, since you see the Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe, so Zakti Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe. The guy by this halacha, Arelan Nazir Saresh has one long Nazir. So in the middle, guy Malay Chardal, Kuba Malay Chardal, Kuba Malay would say that it also means Malay Chardal, and it's one long Naziris. And Machmas Safik will say that that's why he's Mechamatu, Kakubul Melechardal, and Machmer, that he should be knowing one long Naziris his whole life. Okay, so Frak the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Misav like Rebbe. Who says Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rebbe? Does Rabbi Yehuda hold like Rebbe? That if he says Areini Nazik Sar Roishi, then he means that it's one, his whole life should be one long Naziris. But Tanah, we learned in the Mishnah, Areini Nazik Kimini Moisachama, then he counts 365 days Naziris Kimini Moisachama. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Maisa Haya, he brings a raya from Maisa Shahaya, that somebody had said like this, Mechayev, and a bunch of Naziris in that amount of 365. It came Misha Hishlim, he died. So it's more like this. Iyar B'Shleima, Rabbi Yehuda holds Naziris, Kamakabale, he's Mekabel himself a bunch of Naziris. Hainu Taima, this is Pshat Rabbi Yehuda said, they came into Hishlim. Mace, once he finished all Naziris, and then he's Mekabel, he died. So it's shaykh lashon hashlam on that because he finished all his naziris that he's obligated to do, that he's mechayah himself. If you say Yehuda holds that he's mechayah himself one naziris, it doesn't pass the lashon hashlama. He had one naziris and he did it. The lashon hashlama only passes only a bunch of separate naziris. So the Gemara wants to say that from this, it's mashar Yehuda does not hold that it's one long naziris like Rebbe. So who says Rabbi Yehuda? You want to tell me Rabbi Yehuda was like Rebbe? Maybe it doesn't. It's mashma not like that. Va'oid frekting Gemara. Misav like Rebbe is a possible to say Rabbi Yehuda was like Rebbe. Va'tanya, we learned in a brayser Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says Hayreini Nazir Minyan Hilkati Kayetz. And the guy says I'm a Nazir, like the amount of figs to Einim that get picked when they are dried up, uminyan shibale shmita, or like the amount of stalks that are left over in a field in the shmita year from the year before, minyan naziris kiminyan hilkati kayis kiminyan shibale shmita. Then he counts the separate naziris in like the amounts of hilkati kayis and shibale shmita, which is a plural. And all his years of his life, he counts 30-day sets of Nazirisin, one after another. So you see that if somebody says, you see Yehuda holds, if somebody says Hareini Nazir, like a lot, like a high number amount of something, which is a lot, then he counts a lot of different Naziris of 30 days. And not like Shitas Rebbe that says he counts one long Naziris. So you see that from this halacha also. Zakti Gemara Minyan Shani. Since he says over here in these cases Minyan Shibal Shmita, Minyan Helkati Kayetz, it's different from. So that's why it's different, and he counts separate Naziris. But if it would have said Hayreini Nazik Hilkati Kayetz without saying the word Minyan, then Avada you'd say like exactly like Rebbe said, and it would be no one long Naziris. Frekti Gemara, Vishani Leila Rebbe Minyan. Does Rebbe hold that it doesn't make a difference if he uses the word minyan or not? Tanya, we learned in a braysa already Nazir Minyan Ma'asechama. And lacha is Mayin Naziris of 30 days Minyan Ma'asechama. And if it says Kimei Alvana, Mayin Kimei Alvana of 30 days each, and Rebbe says Achi Yom Nazir Salai Kimin Nezchama, that no, he counts one long Naziris until he says Nazir Rois, which is a Lashon Rabim, or Cheminyan Yemois Halavana. But if he says Areini Nazir, even though he says the word Minyan, you see it doesn't make a difference. You see that it means it's one long Naziris. Zakti Gemara, and for the Gemara, that although Rebbe holds that his kavanas for one long naziris, even when he says the word minyan, we call makoim. In Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, you could say that when he mentions the word minyan, when a nazir says the word minyan, then he counts separate naziris. And Rabbi Yehuda, Savala Kavasei Bechada, he holds like Rebbe in one din, that is one naziris. When he says Harini Nazir Kasar Roishi, Upalagalei B'chada, and he argues with Rebbe and the other halacha Lagabi if he uses the word minyan. So like the Mar Tzav Lakosei B'chada, he holds Harini Nazir and Harini line Nazirois, and Naziris Kabbalah is call himself one long Nazir. So Upalagalei B'chada, Yehuda Shanalei Minor. Yehuda holds if he uses the word minyan, it makes a difference. And even if he says Harini Nazir, you say that it means a separate naziris, so long as he uses the word minyan. But for Rebbe, however, does not hold it makes a difference if he uses the word minyan. So in that regard, there's machlekes Rebbe and Yehuda. Zok the Helig Gemara. The Gemara is going to bring different prices that discuss different dinim of a found to be mikabel and seven naziris upon himself. Tana Rabbanan. Bottom learned in the Brayso. Hareini Nazir call me chayav. Somebody says, I'm a Nazir my whole life. Or he says, Hareini Nazir oilam. I'm a Nazir forever. So since he does not convey his mind, doesn't set a time for his Nazir, his halacha is he's a Nazir oilam. And when his hair gets too heavy for him, he's allowed to cut it off. But if he's a Makabal, Naziris, Afilu Meya Shana, even if it's 100 years, but as long as it's a set time. Or Afilu Elef Shana, he says 1,000 years, even though he's probably not going to live 1,000 years. Mikol Makoim, since he puts a set amount on it, has a different din, and halacha is Ein Zen Nazir Olam. Elo, rather he is a Nazir Li Olam. It's one long Nazir is his whole life. What's the difference? So the difference between Nazir Li Olam apparently and Nazir Olam. Nazir Olam could cut his hair whenever it gets too heavy for him. A Nazir Li Olam just means that he can never cut his hair. It's his whole life is one long Naziris. Okay, so that's when it's so that's the difference between setting a time for it and not setting a time for it. So Gemara Vayit. Tanar Rabbanan learned another brayso. Haredi Nazir va'achas. If somebody says I'm a Nazir, ve'achas and one, halacha is minus time. He counts 2 Nazirs in 30 days each. Why? Because when he says Haredi Nazir, that's one Nazir. When he says ve'achas, that's another Naziris. But if he says Haredi Nazir va'achas ve'oid, then he counts 3 Naziris because it says va'oid, that's the third one. And if he adds on to more to that and he says Vishuv, then he counts 4. We see that's a fourth. Because his kavanah is each one to mikabel another 30 day Naziris. Frekti Gemara Lachar, it's Pashat, Pshita. What's the brayso coming to teach you? What's the chiddush in this? So at the Gemara Ma'awad Tema, I might think with this that he says Vishuv Kikulu. He means all of them combined. So if he says Vishuv after he's already mikabel 3 Naziris, maybe he means another 3. So it should be 6 total Naziris. And Kamash Malon, the law, that's not his kavanah. Rather, we say what he intended to do is just make mikabel an additional 4th Naziris, and you count total 4 Naziris. Zok Tehila Gemara Vayter, Ton Rabbanon, we learned in a brayso, Hareini Nazir, if a guy says, I'm going to be a Nazir, and he's mikabel on himself all Naziris, and he explains everything that he's mikabel on himself in another language. So apparently Gemara is talking about like Lashon Yavani. So he uses other languages. So we want to know, what does that mean? So the Gemara, if he says, Simcha says, if he says Hain, he says it's 1, that's Achas. And if he says Digun, that's 2. If he says Trigun, that's 3. If he says Tetragun, that's 4. And if he says Pontigun, then he counts Chamesh Naziris, because that's in Lashon Yavani, that is how they count. That's what those words mean. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. The Gemara is going to bring another brayso that discusses with these words. Lagabi Tumas Nigei Batim. Tanarabban. We learned in a brayso. Let's see. Bayis Agol, a round house that does not have any corners. Or Digun, or Digun. So one side it's round, and the other side it has 2 corners. Or Trigun, it has 3 corners. Or Pointigun means that it has 5 corners. So all these batim, any matam benegam, they don't become tamei with negam that are found in them. But tetragoin, a house that has 4 corners, mitame benegam does become tamei benegam. So only house that has 4 corners is a tamei benegam. Zakdamar my taimo. What's takap shan in this? Where do we know this from? The Gemara we dash from Sukkim in the parsha of Nigei Batim. Because Lamata, in the last pasuk in the parasha, it says, Vayikra Perek Yudal, pasuk Lamates, it says, V'ra v'hine pasah nega b'kiras habayis. And from the fact that it does not say kir, it says a lashon ki rois, we darshan that there has to be 2 walls to the house. And Lamaila, and the pasuk before that, it says, in Vayikra Perek Yudal, pasuk Lamazayin, it says, V'ra hanega v'hine hanega b'kiras habayis. And we darshan that this that it doesn't say kir, it says kirois. It's coming to tell you there has to be an additional 2 walls to the house. Harikan arba. So we see that there's 4 walls that are counted in the parasha of Nigei Batim. So we learn out that a house that gets tamei b'negam is only when it has 4 walls. And since it has 4 walls, then it means it has 4 corners also, and for those 4 walls. However, other houses that have less or more than 4 corners, or 5, or 3, or 2, or 7, then the halacha is they do not become tamei b'negam. So that's the last halacha of this parak. Hadron aloch kol kinuyeh.